Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Ground Up Podcast. My name is Matt Walton, here with my co-host Matt Uber again. We are here with a special guest, somebody who has helped me so much. If not even from the beginning of in the real estate career, I connected with her a while ago, just with help of selling properties because she buys around our area here in Hampton Roads. But as I got more into creative finance, this lady has been my person that's talked me out of a lot of crap, a lot of trying to find bad deals and things like that, and help me out, and just a wealth of knowledge, and someone who's a leader within the sub two community. Her name is Tanishia Spencer. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing really good. Thank you so much for being here. Now
Awesome.
we're going to talk a little bit about everything here, as much as we can get into in the short time that we have. But we know that you know a lot of information about just creative finance in general. But what do you focus on specifically?
So, my main business is temporary housing. When I started out in real estate, the funny thing is, I bought four properties in 7 months from reading a book. I
Mm,
basically followed instructions, read this book, bought four houses in a state that I had never been to, never seen any of these houses. I still haven't seen any of these houses to this date.
mm,
But as I started kind of diving into buying real estate, I realized that I was going to run out of money really fast. I did a home equity line of credit
mm.
in order to buy my first four properties. So technically, I got four houses with no money out of my pocket, but I didn't realize that I was using a creative strategy when I used my HELOC.
Mhm.
So I went down this rabbit hole of watching YouTube, trying to figure out how to buy houses without using my own money. Because again, at some point you're going to run out.
Yep.
And then I started getting stalked on YouTube. That's my running joke,
Yep.
by this guy, Pace Morbeam. And the rest is history. I joined that community, learned a ton about how to talk to sellers, which I was completely afraid of
Mhm.
because I am still, in my mind, an introvert. And so I was afraid to pick up the phone. Kanye West like had to trick me in order to get on the phone and talk to people. I would literally play music in my ear on my phone, and then when the phone would ring, the music stops. And then it's like, oh my God, please don't answer the phone. Please don't answer the phone. And then if they did, it's like, now what do I do?
Yep.
So one of the big things I learned was how to get comfortable being uncomfortable
Mhm.
and just learn the process of how to help people through a process and not make it about me first. And so that's kind of what drove me down into, okay, I think I'm ready to buy houses on the creative side, but then what am I going to do with them is the question.
Mhm.
So you could do long-term rentals, you can do short-term rentals, you can do Section 8, you could do so many different things, but the thing that I kept coming back to was temporary housing. I mostly work with families that are displaced by insurance claims because I have a 20-year background in insurance and I
Mm.
used to be a catastrophe adjuster. So this is a good way for me to be able to serve those clients and still stay in real estate and make money at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. So is it so how did I guess when you came across that midterm rentals, did you know about it while you were doing in the insurance industry, or did you come across it through creative finance?
Nope, I knew about it because I used to have to work with families who were out of. So I used to work mostly auto claims, but we still had to deal with people being displaced because of claims on the auto side when they had RVs, etc. So that's really how I learned about it. And then again, I was a catastrophe adjuster. So I used to go out on the road. So not only was I dealing with people that lost their cars, but they lost their homes, sometimes family members. So that's my first introduction into the business. And then when I'm starting to research different things, short-term rentals were really big in the last, I mean, they've probably been big for a while, but for me in the last few years. But the thing I didn't want to do was I didn't want to have all this like consistent turnover and having people in and out of the properties. And I don't like people that complain.
Hmm.
So, no offense to anybody that, maybe you've stayed in a vacation house and you're not the complainer.
Yeah.
But a lot
Yeah.
of people complain, and I
Yep.
just don't have time for that. So, I'm like, well, how can I do a similar business but not have the complaints and the turnover? And that's really what drew me back to temporary housing.
So what are some of the key differences that you look for in a property that you're going to take on and buy that you would take on versus like someone who's going to flip, someone's going to do a long-term rental or something like that versus your midterm rental here? Like what is the differences in the properties that you're looking for that would be great for that for your strategy versus somebody else's?
So, I still look for a lot of the same base things. And I think that's where people really get messed up because what they're looking for first is how can I maximize like the amount of money that I'm bringing in. But the thing you always have to think about is, if this doesn't work, what's my backup plan?
Mhm.
And we should all be thinking about that, but a lot of people don't. So in this instance, I always look to make sure it cash flows as a long-term rental. The only way that I would say, if you're a seasoned person who already has more demand than you have supply, then you worrying about it cash flowing as a long-term rental isn't that big of a deal, because you already have the demand coming in, so you know it's going to work. But if you don't, long-term rental is my first thing. That's always where I start, as a pencil out.
Okay.
And then on the creative finance side, just because someone says yes does not mean that you have to. Matt, you and I have talked about this
Yep.
so many times,
Yep.
right? A 2.5% interest rate does not pay the mortgage.
Right.
Right? It brings your payment down, but it doesn't pay the mortgage. So I always look for the long term rental rate. And then I'm comparing to what industries are in the area, like who is it that I'm going to serve.
Yep.
If I go buy a property I want to use as a furnished house, but there's a population of like 1,000 people, who's coming there? Nobody. So it's already going to be hard enough in those instances to rent long term rent. So me picking a place like that makes no sense, because I'm just going to end up paying the bill myself, which nobody wants to do. The whole point of getting into real estate is to make money, not give it away.
Yeah, I think that makes a good point, because I see a lot of people when they post their creative finance deals, you look at what the monthly payment is and say the monthly payment is $2,000, and like long-term rent is $2,050. And you're like, but they're like, oh, but a midterm rental and a long-term rent or a short-term rental, you can get this much money. But then we're automatically like, that's not good, because why? Why, Tanisha?
So I'll give you an example. I just saw one, and excuse my voice, I'm getting over a cold. But I just saw one posted where they said the long term rent was $2,000, and the mortgage, I think, on the house was $1,800. So off the break, there's no cash flow. Right? Most people would look at that and say, oh, there's $200 in cash flow. No, there's not. Because by the time you change over the insurance, and by the time you switch it over, if it's not already an investment property, the taxes are going to go up too. So your cash flow is already gone before you even started. You're basically going to be paying somebody to live in that house. And then if you say, well, as a furnished rental, it's $3,000 a month. That sounds great, because in your mind, it's, a $1,200 spread, except it's not, because again, the mortgage is going to go up, the taxes, the insurance, those things are going up. So it's going to increase your payment. And now you're taking on utilities, maintenance, cleaning. You have to get the house furnished. And if you're furnishing the house, you have to pay yourself back from the money that you paid up front. So by the time you're done, maybe you'll be lucky and you end up with $100 to $200 in, cash flow. But if that's the case, you could have just gone and gotten a long-term rental that has less work and made the same amount of money. To me, $200 doesn't wake me up in the morning.
So if Matt came to you and was like, Tanisha, I want to get started on buying properties, and he's talked about this before. We talked about buying properties together, because we have a business together, and we're making money, and sometimes we don't have a place to put that money back into, bringing some return. So how would you start Matt off when buying more properties? Now, I guess you wouldn't start the way you did before with a HELOC and everything. You would probably start a different way. What would you say?
Well, the HELOC wasn't bad, because I mean, again, it was money that I had trapped, right? It was money that was trapped in my house that was making some other bank money instead of the Bank of Tanisha. So in essence, I took my own money and created, money back for it, because those 4 houses, I just sold one of them in November. I bought that house for 80 grand. I think it was 80 grand, and I sold it for 140. So not only did I get my equity money back, but I also got appreciation, right? It was free money. So I don't think that's a bad way to start. But if you're going on the creative side, 2 things you can do. Number 1, you can get into lending, which I still think is great. You just need to be able to vet your lenders, because as a lender, you don't have as much work as the owner, right? But if you want to buy properties, decide how much work you want to put in first. I would tell anybody, ask yourself that question first. Like, do I want to be a hands-on landlord? If the answer is no, then if you're buying properties for rentals, who do you need to find first?
Yep.
A property manager. You need to build your team of people who are going to do all the stuff that has to be done, but you don't want to do it. So once you figure that out, if you say, well, I don't really want to do the work. Okay, great. Well, how much money do I want to spend, and what return am I looking for? And then you start working your way down from areas that you can get those returns. But a lot of it's going to depend on how you buy, right? Because if you're going out now and you're trying to get a DSCR loan at 8, 9, 10%, I don't even know if they're that low at the moment, to be honest. I have no idea.
Mm.
But if you're going to try to do that versus buying something creatively, now you've got to make some comparisons. And here's the other thing about creative finance. You know, the sad part, Matt, is I feel like I'm always the naysayer,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because I'm trying to make sure people make smart decisions,
Right.
which, again, you and I have had this conversation many times.
Mm-hmm.
Just because someone says yes doesn't mean you should. Because with creative finance, if you're doing a subject to, you're in a long-term relationship with the seller,
Mm-hmm.
right? So think about those calls that you may have had in the past where these people are they're very difficult to talk to. You can't get them on the phone. You ask them questions, they don't want to give you answers, they don't want to give you paperwork. What do you think they're going to be like once you buy the house and then you need something from them? They're going to disappear and you're going to be stuck.
Right.
So not only are you vetting the house on creative finance, but you're also vetting the people. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
have to think about it that way. So if you can get all those things to marry, it's wonderful. Like, excuse me, my house in North Carolina that I bought in 2023, the homeowner had it on the market, couldn't sell it. Military bought the house earlier in the year, had the house built earlier in the year, has a 3 point, I think it's like a 3.7% interest rate
Mm-hmm.
on that house. And they already moved. So the house was vacant. So when I came in with the creative offer, they thought it was great. And the only thing the seller asked me was, can you send me proof every month that you make the payment?
Yeah.
Sure. I make the payment, I take a screenshot and I text it, and we move on with life. Easy seller.
Right.
But I have another one that I bought a house from, and it was a divorce situation, a pre-foreclosure, and they were kind of desperate to solve their problem, which I did. But now every couple of months I get a call from them saying, hey, are you ready to sell the house yet?
Mm-hmm.
No, there's 28 years left on the loan, and we agreed that I will never sell it. Like, that's what we agreed to.
Yeah.
But somehow they keep calling me, asking me the same question, like we didn't talk about this. So I love creative finance, love it. But all these things you have to think about as you're getting started. And what the heck are you going to do with the house?
Right.
Again, interest rates don't pay the bill.
Yeah, you've talked me out of plenty of ones that I'm like, Tanisha, they said yes to this, or it's a great deal. Here's all this stuff that I have, and you kind of you bring me back to earth. You're like, Matt, let's go over this, and you tell me if it sounds like a great deal,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Oh,
break it
like your
down.
foundation problem one?
Yeah, you break it down, and you're like, does this sound like a good deal? I'm like, no, no, it doesn't.
No.
No, and it's great because I mean, with me and having the ability of wholesaling, which has been great for us. I mean, the deal that we were going to take down for ourselves, it ended up being a lot more work than it was. You broke it down for me and was like, this doesn't make any sense, Matt. And I was like, you're right. We just wholesaled it, got rid of it in an hour for 15 grand,
There you
and it was
go.
out of it. And so it was a great thing. So you're always the person that brings me back down. Now it's funny you said that you struggled with talking. You didn't want to talk to sellers on the phone when you first started. Because I've heard you talk on the phone with sellers plenty of times. So there's lots of times where I've called you and said, hey, I have a seller. When I first started in creative finance, I had no idea what to do. Um, it's not, I wouldn't say it's sales, but it's not sales. And I think Matt will kind of agree with this because we're not trying to hard close anybody. We never want to hard close anybody with a creative finance deal because we want them to know everything that's going on. We want them to know and be comfortable with it. So that way you don't have the sellers that want to ask you over and over again, are you going to sell the house? Or they're going to call and say, you screwed me over. You lied to me, things like that. We always want to be very transparent with it.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about a few mistakes or a few things that you have found that help you out when you're talking to sellers and things that you need to know as a new person coming in and talking to them.
The first thing is you have to pick up the phone and make the calls. Like, if you're going to be the person on the phone, just get over it. That whole mentality of, I hate cold calls and I hate this and I don't like that. Just get over it. Just get over yourself. Because, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you keep telling yourself how much you hate it, then you're just either not going to do it or you're going to create reasons to get off the phone very quickly. And I used to call it creative avoidance, and that's what Pace calls it sometimes. So I work from home, and I would find reasons to go wash clothes that didn't need to be washed, go wash dishes that needed to not be washed. I'm like, oh wait, I got to go take my afternoon walk, and then I'll come back and make the calls.
Yeah.
And then when I come back, I'm like, oh, well, it's after 5 o'clock. I mean, you're just making up crazy excuses.
Yep. My desk is dirty now. I got to clean this up real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But it was because I was afraid of the rejection, because in my mind, I was going to take it personally. Like, if they say no, it means something about me.
Yep.
So get over that really, really quickly. It means nothing about you. Everybody has their personal situation and whatever it is. So that was the first thing. The second was it's not about me, right? That was the
Right.
big piece too. If I'm calling, especially on creative offers when you're getting started,
Hmm.
all you're thinking about is what's in it for me. How good is it for me? But the fact of the matter is, if you do it right, creative is the last thing that you talk about because everything else that you talked about didn't work. And so your job is to be their guide, not their dictator. So I'm not going to dictate to you what you need to do. I'm going to bring you along in the process.
Okay.
So if someone says, "Well, I'm interested to sell my house, but it's not on market." "Oh, have you considered putting it on the market?" Right? I'm going to ask them that question. If they say no, they're probably going to tell me why. Or they're going to tell me they already tried and it didn't work.
Yep.
Okay, so you don't want to go down that route again
Yep.
because of whatever it may be, a timeline issue, whatever. So you weren't the one who told them no. They told you. All you did was ask the question.
Hmm.
So again, if you go down the route of, well, have you considered fixing up the house yourself? Because you deal with a lot of houses that need repairs. Well, you're just asking them because that is an option for them.
Yep.
If they say no to you, then there's a reason why they're saying no. But what happened is they told you no. You didn't tell them.
Yep.
So as you go through that progression, your job is to make creative the absolute last thing because every other option that you've talked about doesn't work for them.
So you
So
basically letting them say like, "Hey, I don't have any other option."
I have no other option. So
Exactly.
they're buying into it because they've already told themselves that it is their best solution because everything else you just told them, they said wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It took me some time to figure that out.
Let me ask you this question. So, as you have learned this, and it sounds like you've gotten to the point of probably a level of mastery where you feel really comfortable on this, have you outsourced this at all to any VAs? I know we work with a lot of people who do the wholesale side who are, utilizing VAs to make either the calls they don't want to make or the calls they can't get to or to expand their overall market. Do you currently use a VA to do some of this or?
I do not, but also I'm not actively doing wholesale. Like,
Right.
so to be honest, if I get something sent to me on wholesale in our region, you know who I send it to? Matt. Hey, because now I know what my strengths are and what my time is spent on, and most of my time is spent in my temporary housing business. So, like Matt and I had one where I had a referral from someone else in another market that I work with, and I know he's in Hampton Roads. I'm in Richmond. I talked to the person. I was getting married. I'm like, I don't have time for this, and I don't do wholesale. So I called up someone that I number one trust Matt, and two, I know he can get the job done. So we JV'd on that. It was great. I got paid for probably 10 minutes worth of work, to be honest. But I let him do what he's good at, so I can spend time doing what I'm good at.
Yeah.
But when I started, I did hire a VA. But the reason I hired the VA wasn't because I needed somebody to take on lead flow, is because I was afraid to get on the phone. And I thought that my VA would be the buffer between me making those calls. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I can just deal with it when they say yes. But I had a VA at the time where everybody was saying, well, if you make me an offer, then, maybe I'll think about it. Or, well, you called me, all the stuff that you hear from people. They're not really trying to sell their tire kickers,
Yep.
which made me more discouraged. And I had to spend my time training my VA. Now, the good thing is I'm good at talking to people because I talk to people like people. So I was able to train her. But again, I was still in that creative avoidance phase. And really getting a VA for me was part of my creative avoidance, if I'm being honest.
That makes total sense. Now, let me ask you this to go back to the beginning of your story. You said you read a book, and that led you to YouTube. That led you to Pace Morby. What caused you, what was going on in your life to pick that book and to read that book? What were you doing before this, and what made you make the decision to jump in the way you have?
Yeah, so I still have a W-2. I actually like my job. And I've been there for 20 years. So I think 21, something like that. So my husband, my now husband, gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I swear it's back in like, what year? Like probably 2013, 2014, something like that. I read like the first chapter and then I put it down. So right before COVID, I'm actually cleaning off my bookshelf. Okay. I'm cleaning off my bookshelf and I see this book again and I'm like, oh, let me pick it back up. I thought one way to get into real estate was that I had to be a realtor. So like a year or two before that, I went and got my realtor license. But my problem was I was just coming off of a travel job where I didn't literally knew I knew nobody here anymore because I traveled for a really long time. So I was gone and they moved on with life without me. So I pick up this book, I start reading it again, which prompted me to start going to meetups locally. And then that had me meet a lender. I got approved for $1 million line of credit to start buying houses, which is awesome. And then shortly thereafter, COVID happened. And so they decided to stop lending, and the price of everything skyrocketed. It was insane. So I'm like, well, I can't buy anything here. So the book that I read was actually Long Distance Real Estate Investing by David Green from Bigger Pockets. And that book told me two things. Number one, it sent me to the Bigger Pockets forums. But the other two things it told me was to find a realtor and a property manager. And it just so happened that I found the same person that was doing both in a market that I knew nothing about in Indiana. And so reading that book was how I bought those first 4 houses. Again, I bought 4 houses in 7 months. Never seen any of them in person. I've been to Indiana one time, and it was not to the same city where I own these properties. My husband and I went to the Indy 500. We went the same day and left the same day. So I still know nothing about these areas. So then that's where I got into well, I'm going to run out of money, start on YouTube, etc. So that's kind of how my path started moving into real estate. And I got lucky that, when I joined the creative finance community, I just saw there was a need for kind of an organization of information, which had Pace kind of pick me out of a crowd. And from there, I've just developed a really great relationship with him. And so, like, he came to my wedding. So he's like my brother, which is cool. But also, it gave me some behind the scenes of what happens with the business. And I got some really great relationships in the sub 2 community behind that, which was awesome. And that the rest is kind of, where we are today.
So is the W-2 job that you have and have had for the past 20 years, that's the insurance thing you were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be interested. This is kind of a timely matter right now in that what's going on in California. I mean, how is that something that you are involved in, or do you kind of only deal with it regionally, or, what's maybe one or two things that somebody that's not from your industry doesn't know about what's going on in California right now?
So I don't handle claims anymore.
Okay.
Which is great because I don't need to create any problems for myself. But I don't handle claims from a business standpoint anymore, only on the housing side of my business. But one of the big things, especially for California, which matter of fact, I recorded a video last night that I'm going to be posting on my YouTube about California specifically. So the biggest thing is that there's a lot of people in California that do not have insurance anymore on their houses, or at least fire insurance. And I've seen all this controversy about people saying, how dare these insurers not provide insurance? But like, if we think about it from a business standpoint, it costs too much money and the infrastructure is not there to protect their investment. Yeah. And there's a lot of wildfires. Like, I handled claims from the Woolsey fire and the Camp Fire back in 2018. They were horrible. And it's just going to keep continuing. But the big thing, like on my side with the housing piece, there's going to be a lot of people getting in trouble for housing like I already know it, because you cannot raise the price of your rental more than 10% of what it was before these fires happened, before this emergency was declared. Mm-hmm. And if you do, there's literally lists going around that are documenting these landlords. And not only can you face fines, but you can face criminal charges and go to jail. So people really need to
within a certain radius of where the disaster happened, or how does that work?
I don't know the exact radius, but I don't know if they've declared a statewide or just a countywide, because I'm kind of digging into more of the details. But I saw one, it's crazy. I saw one that literally bumped their price up to $28,000 a month. And people are trying to pay it because they don't have, they don't know what else to do. It's so sad.
So I probably feel torn on that aspect, because for me, as an entrepreneur, supply and demand, if somebody's willing to pay 28 grand for my product, why should I not be able to do that? And especially if there's so few houses, why should I not be able to place a premium on it? It's not like I'm forcing somebody to pay that. they're optionally choosing to do so, and maybe in a distressed manner. But I think, I don't know. I mean, I understand why we want to place that rule so that people are not taken advantage of. But it sounds like the person being taken advantage of right now might be the person who's trying to raise their property to $28,000 a month.
And I would say the total opposite of that. And the
Okay.
reason I say that is because on this side of the business, when you run this business, there's a couple things. Number one, reputation matters.
Uh-huh.
So if you're one of those people that is raising your prices and price gouging, we have a lot of companies that we work together with. They will blackball you and they will never work with you again. So you could get somebody in for 28 grand for a couple of months, but when the rest of your money dries up because you can't get these companies to work with you anymore because they've seen what you're doing, you've just messed up your business. And the second thing is we have to balance between hospitality, because that's what we are,
Mhm.
and thinking about people and not just about ourselves. It's the same thing that goes back to that creative finance conversation, which is I can't make it about me first. I have to provide a solution for the other person. And the fact of the matter is, I know hotels do it all the time, like for a specific event, right? They may raise the prices because there's a sporting event going on or something like that. But these are different circumstances because remember, you've got people who may or may not have insurance. Insurance has limits, so they're not going to be able to stay with you. And in a lot of these cases, you may be able to get somebody that's going to stay with you for a year or two in your house. But if you max them out at, let's say 30 grand a month, but they only have $100,000 worth of coverage for 3 months, you're done. And now you may be in a position where you're now searching for more people, but guess what? Now you're on this list. They're like, well, your prices are so outrageous that we can't afford it. And you're also going to have a lot of people who are going out of state to stay in places too, because what's going to happen is they're just not going to be able to afford it, whether it's out of pocket or through insurance, and they're going to be forced to go other places.
Right.
And so, yeah, I get the dilemma, like you're a landlord and we want to maximize our money, but also we still have to think about humanity. And the fact of the matter is, it's not costing you any more to have that property. Like, and I'm telling you right now, the California prices are already pretty high for quite a few of these places.
Yep.
Like, think about where these fires are. It's LA County and like the Palisades.
Yeah.
So those prices are already pretty high. Like 15 grand a month may not be outrageous.
Yeah.
For them. So adding another, $1,500 to that, yeah, it's a premium, but did it cost you any more? Probably not. Very, very, very unlikely. But again, we've got to think about from a business standpoint too. What reputation do we want to have? That's at least how I operate.
No, it makes sense. It's about relationship based, right? I mean, do you want to ruin your long term business for a short term gain?
I have seen some people do it, by the way.
And I come from the automotive industry where in COVID, when inventory became really short, I saw a lot of businesses struggle with that back and forth decision. And some people were doing massive markups over MSRP on the vehicles because they knew if they sold that vehicle, they couldn't do it. But to your point, in a business-based, community-based environment, they likely ruined their reputation inside of that community based off of that short-term proposition. So yeah, I see your point of view for sure. And I guess my personal perspective of it is not looking at it as I'm a company. I'm looking at it as I'm an individual in a company-based environment. I can definitely see the value of a reputation and the continual doing of business. We've got a couple rental properties. We tend to find those tenants on our own. We don't use any people to do that. So that's probably where my skewed opinion is on that originally. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand it. Again, I think for me, because I personally used to be the person on the ground dealing with the
Sure.
people who, had these disasters. I mean, I've had situations where, like my worst claim story ever, there was a massive flood in Texas, like just out of the blue. And this poor man had to evacuate his vehicle with his wife and his baby. Okay. Flood waters like catch them really fast. And they go into what has now turned into a lake. The guy grabs onto a tree, grabs onto his wife, who has the baby. The water rushes, the baby gets swept away. Okay. Now, I've got to be the person to deal with these people on the back end of not only losing their home, their car, they've lost a family member.
Right.
So when I think about the humanity of that piece, I always come back to that one. And I've dealt with some pretty bad stuff, but that's the worst one. It's like, am I really hurting? I'm not. And I'm already number one, we're already charging way over market rent most of the time anyway. Like I just had somebody because I do a placement service for people too, and I just had somebody come off of an $11,000 a month rental for 13 months.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, we can find ways to make our money. We're still okay.
Gotcha. So, how if we go back to being a newbie here, and we go back to somebody looking to jump into this and get into creative finance, where do you think they should start?
I think you have to ask yourself, what are your actual goals?
Yep.
Do you want to be a buyer? Do you want to source your own deals? Right? Do you want to do wholesale? I think wholesale is a great start for anybody that's brand new. If you're trying to get comfortable being on the phone,
Yeah.
even going and working in somebody else's wholesale business, by the way,
Right.
you do not need, in my opinion, as a new person with so many opportunities to go work with other people, I can't see a day where I would start a whole wholesale business from scratch on my own without potentially working with somebody else. I think wholesale is a great place to start
Mhm.
because it teaches you about cash. Then you elevate into other things. But if you're looking to learn about creative finance, of course, you've got, the creative finance or creative real estate with Pace Morby Facebook page. That's a great place to go. A ton of stuff on YouTube. And you can connect with people that are in the Sub 2 community, but there's also other communities that you can connect with. And really, you can find a local title company or an attorney that are familiar with creative finance and work with them too. I think a lot of people forget that, those companies also, like Matt, you have several companies that, title companies that you've worked with, as do I. And they're telling me things that I haven't thought of from a legal standpoint because they deal with them every day. So that's a great place to start as well. But again, you have to define, are you trying to be a buyer? Do you want to source your own deals? Or do you want to go find deals for other people? But in that case, do you want to be a connector? There's so many different things you can do. I
Mhm.
mean, again, I've connected deals for people and get paid on them all the time. Technically, that's what my entire business, for the most part, is about, other than the properties I own in my midterm rental business. I'm a connector. I connect people to opportunities and I get paid for it. And they do too.
Yeah, I think what you said is great. Especially you have to pick your thing. We have a lot of people who join who want to be wholesalers, and you ask them like, "What's your market?" And they're like, "The United States." And you're like, "No, like, no. What's your market?" And then they just like they go, "All right, well, I want to do Florida, Tampa Bay. I want to do Houston, Texas. I want to do like they start naming all these hot markets." And like, you got to stop. You got to slow down. What strategy are you using? I'm gonna do it all. I'm gonna get the properties and sell them to the buyers. Like, slow down. Like we have to slow down. So
Oh,
as a
so you
new
want to
person.
get nothing accomplished, is what you're saying.
Exactly, exactly. And we see people in the I've been doing wholesaling for the past year, and you ask them these questions, and they can't answer them like the right way, and you're like, this is why. You can identify it right away. You're like, you need to pick one market. You need to stick to that market. You don't need to jump markets every 30 days because you didn't get a deal yet. You need to pick one strategy. Are you gonna be the one that finds the deal and does acquisitions and brings it over, or you want to be the one that has the buyer? And so you have to connect to the opposite person, whichever one you decide, and
Mhm.
focus on the strategies and continue to focus on them until you can build up. We see that
Agreed.
happen all the time. And I think what you said is great too about because this is what we did here. We started with wholesaling because we wanted to learn about real estate in general. We wanted to learn how to find deals. That's one of the hardest things you can do in real estate, I think, is learning how to source deals and how to underwrite and know what if this deal is a good deal.
Mhm.
And that was just with cash. And then creative finance is a whole other thing.
Yep.
And so that's why I still come to you consistently. I'm like, all right, here's all the information. Now I know how to get the information, but sometimes it's harder for me to know, like, is this a deal that's worth buying or not?
Mhm.
And so that's kind of our step that we went through. So I think that you put that out great. Is and one big thing that I want to say that people don't focus on that you said is focus on helping people,
Mhm.
because if you can focus on helping people, money will come. But you focus on helping people, then you'll get better at that. We've done, I don't know how many deals. I think we'll see at the end of this year, this month so far. But I think we've done about 4 or 5 deals so far, and 2 of them we didn't get paid on
Mhm.
because we just like the numbers didn't work out, but it worked out just for the seller and for the buyer. And I was like, you know what? We don't need our fee in there. It's fine. Take it, close the deal, and now we can build a strong relationship with all of them.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Do you remember that call that I got on with you? And you may or may not, but it was a house in like Norfolk or Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to tell people this because even the getting comfortable, like talking to people and asking them questions and not being afraid. Um, like I used to be one of those people, I needed you to tell me everything before we got on the phone.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably the first call where I told you, don't tell me anything.
Right.
And it was the realtor. It's like two realtors. The guy was on the phone. The seller was on the phone. You were on the phone. And I asked him, what's got you looking to sell? And he said, I'm exploring other avenues.
Yeah.
And then I didn't say anything. And he's like, hello. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you were done talking.
Yeah.
Like if, in the past, I would never have said that to someone, but I really didn't think he was done talking.
Yeah.
And then I had to apologize. And what I did was I said, I'm sorry. I didn't set the stage basically for this call about why I was going to ask you questions.
Yep.
And then I used the doctor analogy, like, have you ever been to the doctor and they ask you all these questions? But the reason they ask you is so that they can get the right diagnosis and give you the right prescription so they don't kill you, right? So it may be uncomfortable for you to answer some of the questions. And somebody may have already asked you, like the nurse may have asked you, but the doctor comes in and asks you the same questions that you already answered. It's because they're trying to help you. And so I think once I got that through my mind on how to talk to people and realizing I am actually there to help, that's what changed everything. And like you, I've had deals where I don't take any money and I'm okay with that.
Right. With about the long term relationships. How good.
Hmm.
Awesome. So we're gonna jump into this next segment here where we kind of finish it off where we just ask questions designed for quicker answers. Just to
Oh,
grab
boy.
some information off of and take some clips off of them, get it out there for people to digest whatever you have to say very quickly. So I'll go ahead and start it off here. And I like to ask these questions like this where tell me 3 mistakes you see newbie creative finance people coming in that they make consistently.
Thinking that a low interest rate equals a good deal
Mm-hmm.
just because someone said yes, you trying to force something to be a deal.
Right.
And gosh, a third one. I had a really good one and it just went out of my mind. Well, the biggest thing is you're always trying to make it work for you instead of the other person. That's a huge, huge mistake. Again, creative finance is a solution. It is not a crutch.
Right.
It's got to work for everybody. It can't just work for you.
Awesome.
Tanisha, I know one of the things you talked about, probably I think before we hit the record button, is that the fact that you've got a podcast. You talked about Pace Morby and learning on YouTube. If you can, share with us a couple of maybe under the radar people that you might watch that are good to know if I'm thinking about getting into your industry, thinking about getting in to do what you do. Who's a couple of people I might listen to or follow on social media?
I mean, if you're trying to get into temporary housing, I definitely say follow me. But another person that's a really big name right now is Jesse Vasquez. So he's another good one, and he's got his own coaching program, just like I have mine. I have my course that'll be coming out soon, but mine is very, very strategically focused. So he would be somebody that I would also watch. But to be honest, I think if you're trying to get into the housing business, what you really should go study first is hospitality and what it means to serve people at a very high level before you ever get into the real estate piece, etc. Another good podcast to go watch, though, is the Furnished Finder podcast. That one's also really good. I was actually a guest on there, I think once last year, right around this time last year. That's another one to go watch because they bring on investors who are doing this business. And what you get to see is, like, again, most of my focus is insurance, but what you get there is people who are doing RVs. They might be doing tiny homes. They are doing apartment complexes. So they're bringing in different aspects of the business and they're serving a lot of different clientele. So if you watch that one, you get to see the business from a very broad view.
So say somebody watched some YouTube videos and they learned enough to talk to people, some sellers, and they're like, all right, I want to start. Is there certain lists or certain places you think they should start to find certain sellers and situations they should go after?
Yep, I would. If it were me personally, I would start with pre-foreclosures because they are the people who need you the most. I mean, there's all these things where you could call expired listings, right? Not a problem. But the question is motivation. And you want people who are highly motivated to make a decision. That's what you're really looking for. And so if you're starting in creative finance, I would, if you're local, and local to your market and you can get out, go door knock, which is even scarier than getting on the phone. And I have done that too. And I'm just going to call it out to anybody who's like, I'm so scared to door knock because what if they come to the door and they yell at me and I don't know what I'm going to say? The first thing I learned once I got somewhat comfortable was I needed to stop. I needed to stop acting like fear wasn't a real thing. And so I would literally walk up to the door and knock on the door, ask for the person, and then tell them, I know it's weird that I'm standing at your front door. Like, I already know that it's odd. But I saw that there may be an issue with the bank, and I'm really just here, number one, to make sure that you know, and two, to see if there's anything, any information I can give you to help you, or if you already are working through some things. And then I would just stop. When I started, I literally had people that either wouldn't answer the door or they made it very uncomfortable for me. Once I started calling out that I knew it was weird, they kind of laugh about it. Like, yeah, it's real weird that you're standing at my house. But it took the pressure off because it made me a person and not a company trying to take something from them.
So this next question comes from a guy that, comes from a sales background. Okay. So the days of me being scared to make a call or knock a door, those days are long, long gone. But one of the things I think would be very interesting for us to understand is as you make those calls physically on the phone and you make those door knocks, what percentage of them should you have to do? What number do you think that somebody should expect to have to do before they find a yes? So for me, when I'm training a salesperson, I typically say, hey, I need you to pick up the phone X amount of times to get a certain amount of connections. A certain amount of connections are going to result into a yes. Do you think like that? And if so, what are the numbers? Where are the numbers in regards to when you get a call? How many of them do you have to typically make to find that yes?
I mean, the name of the game is volume, regardless, right? So if you're knocking doors or calling pre-foreclosures, let's just talk about them specifically. I mean, you could make 100 calls and only connect with 5 people.
Right.
It's extremely possible, especially with foreclosures, because those people are getting a ton of phone calls or their phone numbers are disconnected, they're screening calls or whatever. So you may only connect with 5 people. And out of those 5 people, you might only have one that says, yes, I'm willing to work with you. But you know what? All you need is one.
Yeah.
And so I personally think sometimes the issue is when we set those numbers, we say you have to call 100 people so you will definitely get a deal. Or if you call 50 people, or if you knock on 50 doors, you'll definitely get a deal. And that's just not always the case because everybody's at a different stage. So like you guys, you're working very specific lead types and you have leads coming in and you have a lot of different sources. So for you, that volume may work because you're not just focused on one motivation type. But what I would tell anybody who, if you're picking free foreclosures, just go knock the doors. That's it. Just go do the work. Stop focusing on the numbers because the more you focus on numbers, you get discouraged if it doesn't happen. So just go do the work. If there's 100 doors to go knock them. And if they don't answer, go knock them again.
How often do you follow up with them if you do at all?
For door knocks,
Yeah, for any of that. Yeah.
so if it's a door knock and they answered the door and they didn't yell at me and we're okay, I'm setting that timeline while I'm standing in front of them and I'm getting their phone number and I'm making sure it's the right number while I'm at the door, right? Because sometimes people will give you a fake phone number. I mean, I have given people fake phone numbers before. Um, so it depends on the timeline and what their issue is, but usually I'm going to follow up with them within 24 hours. But again, I'm setting those expectations up front.
Let me ask you this question. So, and this is kind of how we wrap up every one of these interviews is what are your 1 year, 5 year, and 20-year goals?
So my 1 year goal is right now I'm focused on making a little bit of a switch in my business as far as the types of properties that I want to buy. So in the next 1 to 5 years, my goal is to have at least 5 multifamily buildings. And I'm going to transition those into Section 8 because I'm constantly looking for ways that I can serve the community, right? And I have a way to do that with my midterm rental business. But from a different standpoint, number one, Section 8 money's guaranteed. It's not going away. And so I do a lot of reading the writing on the wall about what's happening in different areas of the industry, following what's happening with the government, etc. So that will be where I'm at. In 5 years, I don't plan on having my W-2 anymore, unless I just want to. I mean, that's honestly why I'm still there now, because I mean, I like it. but I've also been there for a while, so I don't need to be there anymore. 20 years. How old will I be in 20 years? I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't say it out loud.
You know what? I have zero. I'm not one of those people. I have zero problem saying how old I am because nobody ever believes me anyway. But 20 years, like my goal is just to have a business that's totally self-sustainable, where everyone in the business is doing the work except for me. All I have to do is look at the high level. Oh, here's what came in today. Are we serving people in the right way? Are we still focused on our values and our goals? Like everything still aligns with our values. And then I'm going to Disney World. I'm going out of the country. I want to go to all the Disney parks around the world. So I'm already working on my leisure plans and just going to live my life. And that is really how I've decided what businesses I want to do too. What life do I want to live first? Not what business is going to run me so I can't go do it.
All right. So at the end of the day, when Tanishia is done, our businesses ran. They're all running themselves. Money's coming in, but it's Tanisha. You're gonna close your eyes for the last time, and what do you want your legacy to be?
To be honest, the biggest thing is I want people to know that I am a good person and that I cared about people. And my goal was to help in any capacity that I could. That's what I want people to know the most about me. I mean, the money's fine. The business is fine. Some people want to leave a legacy of money, and those things are great. I would like to leave a legacy of education so people can continue to grow themselves and other people. So it's service, and that I was a good person.
Well, Tanisha, you're a good person.
I can say I've known you for less than an hour, and I think that you've made that to me undeniable so far.
No,
so
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, as much help as you give me, you're absolutely an amazing person, Tanisha. Not only to me, but everybody in the community and sub too, and anybody you're around. Thank you so much for all you do for me and everybody else. Tanisha, thank you so much for being here. If you guys got any value from this, like I know I did, please like, subscribe, comment, hit the alert button so that way you can get alerted when we put new podcasts out. And please search Tanishia Spencer on YouTube. Find her Midterm Rental Mastery podcast and listen to that if you want to learn more about this industry in general. Tanisha, how can people reach out to you if they need to send you some properties, some multifamily properties?
All of my information is right on that YouTube channel. So I'm going to send you there to subscribe, just like these guys asked you to do on their channel. And all of my contact information is in my descriptions on every single video.
Awesome. And all of our information for social media handles will be in the description of this video as well. Tanisha, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.